Hello everyone. Welcome back to the YouTube channel of Uncle Dewey's Ghost Stories. I hope you all have a thrilling time listening to ghost stories. Before we dive into today's story, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel to support Dewey. Thank you very much. Now, let's start with the first story of the day. This story was told to Dewey by a young woman. She mentioned that in her neighborhood, there was a man called Uncle Two who lived during the Great Flood of 2000. Every year in the Mekong Delta, the fields and paddies are flooded, causing people to travel by boat instead of walking on land. This natural phenomenon is beneficial because Uncle Two enjoys fishing and setting up traps during this season. During the flood season, every evening around 5 or 6, Uncle Two would bring his fishing net and rod onto his boat and rode in nearby fields to set traps for the night. With the water level high, fish are plentiful, and many young men in the neighborhood would also go fishing. However, as time passed, the fish population decreased due to overfishing. Uncle Two then decided to try fishing in more distant fields, hoping for better luck. One evening, after dinner, he prepared his gear and rode about 10 kilometers away to a secluded field. Upon arrival, he found no one else fishing there, which meant there might be plenty of fish. He anchored his boat and set his net, then rode to a nearby grove to catch crickets. Afterward, he looked for a nearby house to rest until midnight, planning to check his nets before dawn. He found a still house, but noticed it seemed empty with no lights on. He tied his boat to the house's pillar to keep it dry from the rain. As he lay in his boat, he heard laughter and chatter from above, like a family having dinner. He assumed the owners had returned and asked permission to stay until midnight. However, no one responded, and the laughter ceased. Later, he heard a faint voice from a woman saying yes, so he assumed it was okay to stay. He decided to eat his prepared meal on the boat. Suddenly, he heard a child's voice asking to join him for food. Feeling generous, he prepared a bowl of rice and some snacks, climbed the stairs to the house, and called out to the children. But the house was pitch dark, dusty, and empty. Exploring further, he saw a dusty altar with 3 black and white portraits, one of a woman and 2 of children. The faces were blurred and eerie, sending chills down his spine. Startled, he hurriedly rushed out the front door and jumped on the boat, trying to escape as quickly as possible. However, as he turned around, he saw 2 children from the photograph sitting at the front door, devouring the bowl of rice and the bag of snacks he had left there earlier. Terrified, he wet his pants and quickly took them off, threw them towards the children, and watched them jump into the river and disappear. At this point, he was completely disoriented and knew he had to get on the boat and leave as fast as possible. Once on the boat, he untied the rope from the dock, but the boat wouldn't move as if it was stuck. Turning around, he saw the mother and her 2 children from earlier submerged in the river, holding onto the boat to prevent it from moving. He was at a loss and began to kneel on the boat, pleading with them to let him go, promising to return the next day with offerings. After his plea, the 3 figures disappeared underwater, and he frantically rowed away, eventually reaching a house on stilts where some men were drinking by the riverbank. Without pants, he approached, and they offered him clothes. After dressing, he recounted his terrifying experience, and the men explained that years ago, a family lived in the abandoned house, a husband, wife, and 2 children. The husband, prone to jealousy and violence, poisoned his family after a fight, leading to their deaths. He turned himself in, and the community buried the family, setting up a memorial. Since then, the house has been abandoned, and locals avoid the area due to eerie occurrences. Hearing this, he was too scared to return home alone and waited until morning for the men to accompany him. Once home, he prepared offerings and returned to the house to fulfill his promise, never daring to visit again, deeply traumatized by the events. The next story, which was once in the news, happened about 7 to 8 years ago. It involved 2 sisters from Dong Nai who moved to Bin Duong for work. The younger sister, Han, was around 17 to 18 at the time. One evening, she made plans with a young man she'd been chatting with and told her sister not to wait for her, as she wouldn't be returning that night. At the meeting place, instead of a cafe or restaurant, Han found herself by a riverside with a young man. After some conversation, he tried to force himself on her, leading to an argument. When Han resisted, he strangled her, initially intending only to silence her, but accidentally killed her. Panicked, he fled, but returned 2 hours later to find her body still there. He then committed an atrocious act, violating her corpse before stealing her jewelry and phone, and burying her body by the riverbank. Han didn't come home, so we thought she might have stayed over at a friend's house. We couldn't contact her and waited until the next evening, but she still didn't return. Her sister found it strange and started reaching out to Han's friends to see if she had visited them. They all said Han hadn't been to their houses. Han's sister then contacted the police to report her missing, providing details of when she left and what she was wearing. But she didn't know who Han was with. 3 days later, one of her sister's friends mentioned reading in the newspaper about an unidentified body found floating in the Saigon River. Han's sister went to the site to identify the body, and it was indeed Han. She recognized the clothes Han was wearing before she disappeared, although her face was swollen, and one shoe was missing. They brought Han's body back for a funeral. The investigation details are unknown, but after selling off Han's belongings, the young man involved ran out of money and resorted to theft again. He was caught stealing from a store, and when questioned by the police, he confessed everything, including hiding Han's body in the river. This led to further investigation, and he was eventually imprisoned. This story ends with the young man paying for his actions. Although it's not a terrifying tale, there's a hint of the supernatural, as if Han's spirit compelled him to confess his crimes. The next story is about a ghost. In the past, ghosts could impersonate familiar people. In a village, 2 women, Mrs. Tu and Mrs. Nam, often went to the market early. Mrs. Nam would wake up first and call for Mrs. Tu to join her. One morning, Mrs. Tu heard Mrs. Nam calling her to go to the market. Feeling unusually sleepy, she got ready and went outside, where she saw Mrs. Nam facing away. Mrs. Nam didn't have her usual market basket, which was strange. Mrs. Tu asked why, but Mrs. Nam didn't reply. Throughout the walk, Mrs. Nam remained silent, which was unusual. When they reached the ferry crossing, it was still dark, and the ferryman wasn't there yet. Mrs. Tu asked Mrs. Nam why he wasn't there, and Mrs. Nam replied in a strange accent, "Wait a bit, he'll come." Mrs. Tu was about to respond when Mrs. Nam offered to check her hair for lice, which was odd. Mrs. Tu declined, saying she had just washed her hair, but Mrs. Nam insisted, sitting down and offering her head for Mrs. Tu to check. When Mrs. Tu reached out with her hands to catch lice at Mrs. Nam's scalp, she noticed something strange about Mrs. Nam's head today. Her hair was greasy and had an unpleasant odor. Since it was dark, they only had a flashlight to see while catching lice. Mrs. Tu asked Mrs. Nam why her hair was so greasy and smelly, wondering if she hadn't washed it in days. Mrs. Nam replied, "I'm not the Nam you know." Mrs. Tu was confused and warned Mrs. Nam not to joke about ghosts in the middle of the night. At that moment, Mrs. Nam turned her head towards Mrs. Tu and revealed, "I'm a water ghost from the riverbank. I noticed you both frequently pass by here, so tonight I'm here to drag you down." After Mrs. Tu regained consciousness, she recounted how Mrs. Nam's face wasn't hers, but instead looked like it was peeling off, with parts hanging loose. Her hair was greasy and pitch black. Mrs. Tu was so terrified she fainted. Around 1 a.m., Mrs. Nam from the neighboring house came to call Mrs. Tu to go to the market, but Mrs. Tu didn't respond. Mrs. Nam was scared to go alone, so she waited until dawn when other villagers went to the market. They found Mrs. Tu lying unconscious at the riverbank. They woke her up by pulling her hair, and she narrated the experience to the villagers. The villagers said she was lucky the ghost didn't drag her into the river. From then on, Mrs. Tu and Mrs. Nam always invited another person to join them when going to the market, as going alone or in pairs was too frightening. The story serves as a lesson for those who venture out at night and call each other's names. Moving on to another tale. A girl from SOC, Trang, shared a story about a spiritual attachment affecting her cousin's girlfriend. In 2007, she was living in District 8, Saigon, working at a company. Her cousin, around 20 years old, was dating a girl named Hong. Everything was normal until Hong started fainting frequently at work, seemingly due to low calcium levels. However, after months of this recurring issue, people suspected she was possessed. One day, Hong fainted again, but this time she spoke with a different voice, sounding like a man. Her boyfriend, Kang, rushed to her and asked if she was okay. The spirit possessing her replied, claiming it had entered her because she passed by its place daily and it found her beautiful. Kang asked why the spirit didn't choose someone from its area, and the spirit explained it didn't like the local girls because they were aggressive with long fangs. It only loved Hong. Kang pleaded with the spirit to leave Hong as she was too weak. Eventually, the spirit left, and Hong regained consciousness. Despite this, the spirit returned a few days later, causing Hong to faint again. Her family decided to take her to a relative, Master Sao, who specialized in removing spirits and curses. On the way to Haozhong, Hong clenched her teeth tightly, unable to eat, which made her very hungry. Upon arrival at the bus station, the spirit took over again, making Hong tear apart lottery tickets from nearby vendors. They took her to Master Sao's house, where he summoned the spirit and asked why it possessed Hong. People often wonder why he loves her down there so much. The young man explained, "I see her passing by me all the time, and I truly love her. I even plan to take her with me. A few times, I thought about pushing her car to cause an accident, but she was chanting prayers, so I couldn't do it. Just the other day, I almost took her out of her house, but her family cried and screamed her name so loudly that she let go of my hand and returned to her body. Otherwise, I would have taken her soul by now." Later, a man named Mr. Sao pleaded with the spirit to let her go, but the spirit insisted she must be his wife and die. Mr. Sao then used a bundle of incense and recited something before stroking from her forehead down to her feet. He said he had expelled 3 spirits from her body. Afterward, he gave her a red bracelet and advised her to make offerings on the full moon day. Even after she married Kang, her cousin, they forgot to offer a fruit plate to the male spirit, and he possessed her again. Fortunately, Mr. Sao was at the wedding and gave her another bracelet, and she was no longer possessed. It's uncertain if the male spirit has left for good, but if offerings aren't made, he might return. Another story involves a time when you worked at a seafood company at 17. You lived in a dormitory and shared a room with a woman named Ha, who was haunted by a spirit. She told you she once visited a temple and saw a photo of a beautiful deceased woman. Ha admired the photo, and since then, the female spirit followed her. You noticed that whenever Ha argued at work, the spirit would possess her and cause chaos. However, at home, she was normal. One evening, while out with friends, Ha felt uneasy and wanted to return home, sensing a ghostly presence. Back at the dorm, you found Ha sitting in front of a mirror, tilting her head like the woman in the temple photo. She asked who insulted her that morning, reminding you of an argument at work. Concerned, you took Ha to see your uncle, a spiritual practitioner. He asked the spirit why it followed Ha and discovered it was a girl who drowned while washing dishes by the river. Her stepfather didn't save her, and she ended up in the temple. The spirit refused to leave with your uncle and vanished. Afterward, you and Ha returned to work, but eventually lost contact. You hope she hears this story and reaches out to you through the contact number provided. This story is shared by Dewey, who changed the names for privacy. If Ha recognizes her story, she might reconnect with you. This tale ends here, and you invite everyone to like and subscribe to Dewey's YouTube channel and share their thoughts in the comments. Look forward to more interesting stories soon. Hello everyone. Welcome back to the YouTube channel of Uncle Bod Dewey's Ghost Stories. I hope you have a thrilling time listening to these tales. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the first story of today. These first 2 stories were sent to me by a lady who mentioned that these tales were passed down by her grandmother from a long time ago. According to her grandmother, these events happened when she was very young, so it's been about 70 or 80 years since then. Back in those days, in her grandmother's neighborhood, there was a couple who had just gotten married. The wife was pregnant and ready to give birth. One night, around 11 or 12 p.m., the wife started experiencing labor pains. The husband quickly rowed a boat to take her to the clinic because transportation was mainly by boat due to muddy paths that were difficult to traverse. The husband's only thought was to row the boat as fast as he could to reach the clinic because his wife was in severe pain. At that hour, houses were closed and lights were off, with only sparse leaf-roofed homes around. As he rowed, he noticed a light ahead, resembling a clinic. Indeed, when he arrived, he saw a small clinic on the shore. He helped his wife off the boat and into the clinic. Inside, two women dressed as nurses approached and held his wife's hand. They asked him if he had brought any supplies for the birth. He suddenly realized he had forgotten to bring anything due to the rush, so the nurses advised him to leave his wife there and return home to gather the necessary items. He left his wife at the clinic and went back home to collect some clothes and boil water to bring back. However, when he returned to the river, he rowed and rowed, but couldn't find the clinic. Despite the surroundings looking the same, there was no clinic to be found. Seeing how anxious he was, the man kept pacing back and forth along the river. He rowed his boat repeatedly to the spot where he thought the clinic was, but it turned out to be his cemetery. Feeling restless, he continued rowing from around 2 or 3 a.m. until nearly 4 a.m., repeatedly passing the same river section. By this time, some villagers on both riverbanks were waking up, going to their back decks to brush their teeth and wash their faces. They noticed the man on the river, wondering why he was frantically rowing back and forth. Curious, they asked him, "Where are you going, rowing back and forth like this? Are you looking for someone?" The man stopped his boat and explained to the people on the shore, "Last night I took my wife to the clinic here so she could give birth. But when I dropped her off and went home to get hot water, I returned to find no clinic, just this deserted area with only graves." Hearing this, a woman on the shore shouted back, "Oh dear, you're lost. This river section is desolate. There's no clinic here. If you want to go to the clinic, you have to head over to the big canal over there. Turn, and you'll find the large canal leading to the clinic. There's no clinic here. It's mostly cemeteries. You might have been led astray by spirits because this area is haunted. We locals are scared, let alone outsiders like you. Try go to the big canal and see if you find a clinic. Ask if any pregnant women were admitted last night." In a panic, the man thanked them and hurriedly rowed to the big canal. There, he found a clinic and rushed inside to ask the nurses if they had seen his wife, who was in labor around 1 to 2 a.m. The nurses confirmed that a pregnant woman was admitted during that time, but it wasn't his wife. The people accompanying the woman said, "Did you go to the wrong clinic? Only one woman was admitted last night, and she's not your wife." Despite this, the man searched every room, hoping to find his wife, but she was nowhere to be found. Realizing his wife wasn't there, he felt weak and knew she must be near the cemetery he had seen earlier. The villagers helped him back to his boat and suggested he search the area again. A local man offered to accompany him and guide him to the spot. When they reached the area, they found many simple earthen graves. The local man explained, "About 10 years ago, there was no cemetery here. It only appeared 3 or 4 years ago because many bodies drifted here, and the villagers felt sorry for them, so they buried them, forming a cemetery." The local man pointed to 2 female spirits that were said to haunt the area, explaining that they were drowned bodies buried in the cemetery. These spirits often caused trouble, and lately, livestock had gone missing, so no one dared to visit this area at night. The local man pointed to the graves, suggesting the man look there for his wife. Upon reaching the graves of the 2 spirits, the man found his wife's body lying on one of them, her stomach gruesomely torn open, with no sign of their child. Horrified, the man screamed and cried, holding his wife's body. Hearing his cries, nearby villagers rowed over to see what happened, shocked to find him holding his wife's corpse. The incident reached local authorities, who accused the man of superstition and claimed he killed his wife, fabricating the story. Tragically, The man was convicted of murdering his wife and was sentenced to death, despite his pleas of innocence. This marked the end of his story, a tale of injustice and supernatural happenings. There was an old house that had been abandoned for a long time, with no one living in it. The owner, Mr. Nam, decided to rent it out at a low price. After some time, a young man from a nearby area came to rent the house because he found the neighborhood quiet and the rent very affordable. On his first day, he only did a little cleaning and moved in. He liked the house because it had a large fruit garden in the back. During the day, he would hang a hammock there and nap until evening, then return to the house to study. At that time, the village didn't have electricity, so every evening, the young man would light a lamp to go about his activities and study. Mr. Nam, although not nosy, would frequently check on the young man to ensure he wasn't lacking anything. The house was old, and Mr. Nam was willing to help if needed. However, after a short time, Mr. Nam noticed something odd. Every night, when he passed by, he saw the young man talking to himself under the lamp's light. Concerned, Mr. Nam asked why he was still awake. The young man replied that he was teaching a girl who would come over each night when she saw the lamp on. Initially, Mr. Nam didn't think much of it and left it at that. As time passed, Mr. Nam became more observant of the young man's habits. He noticed that the young man slept during the day and stayed up all night, always talking to himself. Mr. Nam was worried, but didn't want to intrude too much. He noticed the young man looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept for months, and his skin was pale, like someone severely ill. One day, while cooking porridge, Mr. Nam brought some over for the young man, advising him to balance his studies and rest. Touched by Mr. Nam's kindness, the young man explained that he wasn't studying too much but stayed awake at night because he had a girlfriend. She was 18, worked during the day, and came over at night for lessons. Mr. Nam was relieved to hear the young man had a girlfriend, but still advised him to prioritize his health. Even after this, Mr. Nam kept an eye on the young man. A few days later, he went to check on him again, but received no response. Entering the house, he found it empty and discovered the young man sleeping in a hammock in the garden. Mr. Nam was alarmed and asked why he was sleeping outside, to which the young man replied that his girlfriend had invited him to the garden in his dream, and he had fallen asleep there. Mr. Nam found this strange, but realized what was happening. He advised the young man to avoid seeing the girl and stay indoors for his health. The young man agreed, but Mr. Nam remained concerned. A few days later, Mr. Nam decided to tell the young man to move out due to his declining health and the poor condition of the house. However, when Mr. Nam went to the house again, he found the young man had hanged himself in the garden. Mr. Nam shouted for help, but it was too late. The young man had died some time ago. It's heartbreaking. He recounted to the locals that in the past, he had a daughter who died of an illness at the age of 18. Grieving, he buried her in the backyard and planted a banana tree to shield her grave from the elements. However, seeing his daughter's grave every day was too much for him and his wife to bear. So, they decided to leave the house and build a new one elsewhere. He mentioned that he noticed strange behavior from a young man, but was too late to intervene. Tragically, that young man also lost his life in the same house. Moving on to another story, a girl shared her experience from when she was in 9th grade. At that time, she no longer lived with her father, but returned to her own home. Her parents lived in a different unit, so she stayed home to study for exams. Her neighborhood, once lively a decade ago, became deserted as people moved to cities like Saigon and Binduong for work. Many houses were abandoned, including those near hers. Only a few families remained, like Mr. Sao's, who lived next door. The house on the other side was sold to a woman named Han, whom the girl knew since childhood. Han moved in with her young child and was expecting another. Han and the girl were close, so she often visited Han's house to play and help with the children. Han opened a small bubble tea shop with billiard tables and arcade games. The girl's bond with Han's second child, Min, grew strong. However, in the 2014 Lunar New Year, while the girl was away in Mao, she received tragic news that Min had died. Han was cooking a large pot of stew on a charcoal stove when Min accidentally fell into it. Despite immediate efforts to save him, the injuries were too severe. The incident left Han devastated, blaming her husband for negligence. Although she shared some responsibility, as she should have ensured Min's safety before stepping out, the tragedy was irreversible. Friends advised Han to move away to escape the painful memories. Eventually, Han and her husband relocated to Saigon, and the girl lost contact with her. About a year later, you accidentally saw a photo on Han's Facebook, and the two of you started talking again. You noticed that Han was pregnant once more. However, the story didn't end there. Everything began when Han's family moved out, leaving the house abandoned. Since then, whenever you passed by the house, you heard a sound as if someone was using a spoon to hit a metal door, echoing from 7 p.m. to 4 a.m. Even though your house wasn't right next to it, living alone made you very scared. So, you decided to move to Uncle Sal's house. At Uncle Sal's, you shared a room with his youngest daughter, Nu. The room was spacious enough for 2 beds, with Uncle Sal and his wife sleeping on one bed while you and Nu shared the other. Nothing strange happened until Nu moved out to sleep in the front room. Then, terrifying events began at Uncle Sal's house, which was not new. It was quite old. Uncle Sal was the second owner, having bought it from Aunt Nam, who built the house but never lived there for unknown reasons. She sold it cheaply, and Uncle Sal bought it, adding a small annex for a morning cafe. The annex had half-height tin walls with wire fencing above, allowing outsiders to see in. During that time, you stayed up late studying, often hearing noises from a kitchen where Uncle Sal sold porridge. The sound of pots and pans clattering was constant, but you were too afraid to check, opting to sleep until morning. When you mentioned it to Uncle Sal, he advised you to ignore it, saying it was just rats. One night, armed with a flashlight, you heard the noise again. You turned on the flashlight, and the sound stopped, but it resumed once the light was off. You tried to sleep despite the fear, feeling a presence next to you outside the mosquito net, whispering, "Aren't you afraid of me?" You screamed, but no one heard. Aunt Sal, who was awake, came and shook you awake. She advised you to ignore it and not use the flashlight. Later, you felt a child climb onto you, making it impossible to move. The child taunted you, saying, "Do you think I'm scared of you?" You recited a prayer, and eventually the weight lifted. Exhausted, you fell asleep. The next day, you were too afraid to stay at Uncle Sal's, opting to return home, despite feeling uneasy there too. Back home, while studying for an exam, you fell asleep at your desk with your legs under the bed. You dreamt of someone pulling you under the bed, waking to find yourself beneath it with a bleeding nose. You rushed to Uncle Sal's for help, and the doctor confirmed a nasal fracture. After this incident, you no longer stayed at your house or Uncle Sal's, moving to your father's unit, where more stories unfolded.